There was a truck in the Soviet Union that inspired fear just by its name. Drivers cursed it, mechanics hated it, and yet no one could forget it. It was called Kolkhida, the KAZ-606, a promise of modernity that turned into a nightmare. Slow, unstable, and with flaws that could ruin an entire mission, it became the symbol of what went wrong in Soviet engineering. But over the years, that failure turned into legend. How did such a despised truck become the most iconic of all? Today, you'll discover the story of the Kolkhida, the mistake the USSR could never bury, the birth of an ambition. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union was experiencing a modernization fever. The country wanted to move beyond the trucks, based on World War II designs, and produce vehicles capable of competing with the West. In this context, the decision was made to build an automotive plant in Kutaisi, in the Republic of Georgia, a region known for its wine and culture, but with no experience in car manufacturing. Nonetheless, the plan was set in motion. The Kutaisi Automobile Plant, KAZ, was born with the mission to produce modern trucks for the entire USSR. The Georgian engineers were filled with enthusiasm and wanted to prove they could create something unique, different, with regional identity. Looking for inspiration, they focused on Central Europe, but the Czechoslovak Škoda 706 RT truck was a benchmark in design and functionality. It had a forward, modern, and sleek cabin. From there, the KAZ-606 Kolkhida was born, named after the ancient Greek region on the coast of the Black Sea. It was the first Soviet truck with a cab-over engine design, featuring a small sleeping compartment and an elegant look for its time. On paper, it promised to revolutionize Soviet transportation. In reality, it was destined to write a very different story. The dream that turned into a nightmare. The major advancement of the Kolkhida, its forward cabin, also proved to be its biggest mistake. The engineers did not think to make it tiltable. This meant that to inspect the engine, parts had to be dismantled from the inside. Mechanics cursed every time they had to fix something, and drivers ended up soaked in sweat from the heat emanating from the engine block under their feet. Exhaust gases seeped into the cabin through poorly sealed joints. The noise was deafening, and the journey a torment. There was no effective ventilation or insulation. Driving a Kolkhida for hours was a test of physical endurance. Over time, the engineers tried to correct the error. A version with a tiltable cabin was introduced, but the improvement came too late. The rest of the defects remained. The weak engine, poor material quality, and continuous road failures. A weak engine for a giant of steel. The heart of the Kolkhida was an engine inherited from the ZIL 157, a 6-cylinder inline of 5.5 liters that barely reached 110 horsepower. For a heavy truck with a non-aerodynamic cabin, it was like trying to move a mountain with a fan. It barely reached 55 kilometers per hour under ideal conditions, and its theoretical top speed of 65 kilometers per hour was more of a dream than a real figure. On slopes, the truck could hardly advance, and to maintain speed on flat terrain required pushing the engine to its limits. Overheating was constant, the oil boiled, and the joints gave way. Truckers gave it cruel but clever nicknames. One of the most well-known was the mountain tractor, because it only worked well downhill. When others said it ran if pushed by the clouds. As if that wasn't enough, it consumed 50 liters of gasoline every 100 kilometers. Its 210-liter tank emptied at an alarming rate. Although fuel was cheap in the USSR, the number of stops and repairs made it an operational nightmare. From mockery to popular myth. Few vehicles in Soviet history were as insulted and as praised as the Kolkhida. Among truckers, jokes traveled faster than the truck itself. They called it the Frog, the Russian Tear, Georgia's Pride, Russia's Shame. Some even wrote verses and songs. He who hasn't been to Odessa hasn't seen the sea. He who hasn't worked with a Kolkhida doesn't know sorrow. Anecdotes also circulated like this one. If an engine was so bad it was embarrassing to use as a spare, it was sent complete to the Kutaisi plant. It was the kind of humor that helped cope with frustration. For drivers, the Kolkhida was more than just a vehicle. It was a symbol of Soviet absurdity, where good intentions crashed against industrial inefficiency, factory problems. A large part of the disaster took root within the Kutaisi plant itself. Production was chaotic, quality control was practically non-existent, and parts theft was common. It was said that at the end of the shift, guards simply opened the doors, and workers could take anything that fit under their arms. The result was predictable. Trucks left the factory with defective or incomplete parts. The drivers tasked with transporting the new vehicles across the country were the first to suffer. Many couldn't even start the trucks on the first try. In other cases, the cabin detached from the chassis during tests. Windshields vibrated until they shattered, seals let water through, and brakes failed due to hose leaks. Each trip was an adventure or Russian roulette on wheels. Attempts at salvation. Despite everything, the Georgian engineers did not give up. In 1963, they presented a modernized version, the KAZ-608, based on components from the ZIL-130, including a much more powerful V8 engine. On paper, it was a substantial improvement, but there was a problem. The Kutaisi plant barely received engines. The factories in Moscow and Leningrad had priority, so the Kolkhida mostly continued to use the old six-cylinder engine. It wasn't until 1967 that some models finally received the new V8. It was powerful, but the damage to the reputation was already done. No one trusted the Kolkhida. Truck drivers preferred any other vehicle over being trapped under its hot cabin and thirsty engine. However, the truck found a curious refuge in an unexpected area: airports. There, where distances were short and speeds low, the Kolkhida performed reasonably well. It adapted as a fuel tanker, mobile passenger staircase, internal transport, and runway support truck. Finally, away from the Soviet highways, the Kolkhida found a place where it couldn't fail too much: the end of an era. In 1968, after just 7 years of production, the Kolkhida was permanently withdrawn. Its successor, the KAZ-608, also failed to redeem itself. The project was closed, and assembly lines were adapted for simpler vehicles. In total, just over 15,000 units were produced, a modest figure by Soviet standards. Most were retired in the 70s, although some continued working in rural areas or factories for decades, enduring the passage of time as relics of a failed ambition. The Kolkhida was replaced by ZIL and MAZ models, much more powerful, reliable, and with more efficient diesel engines. But none of them stirred as many emotions, nor as much hatred, as that truck born in the mountains of the Caucasus. The legacy of an unforgettable failure. Over the years, the Kolkhida began to be seen differently. It was no longer the trucker's joke, but a symbol of an era, a reminder that even mistakes can have character. For collectors and lovers of Soviet vehicles, the KAZ-606 represents the courage of a region that sought to innovate without experience or resources. It embodies the Georgian spirit within the Soviet system: optimistic, stubborn, and proud. Seeing a restored Kolkhida today is like looking at a living fossil of the industrial dream of the 60s. Its straight-lined design, large metal cabin, and round headlights evoke a mix of nostalgia and respect. In Soviet transport museums, the Kolkhida holds a special place, not for its technical achievements, but for what it represents. The ambition to do something great, even if it didn't turn out well. From failure to legend. At the beginning, we wondered how such a hated truck could become a legend. The answer lies in its history. The KAZ-606 was not just any failure. It reflected an era where innovation mixed with improvisation. The Kolkhida marked the USSR's first attempt to adopt forward control cab design, paving the way for new generations of Soviet trucks and leaving an indelible mark on the memory of those who drove it. Yes, it was slow, uncomfortable, and flawed. But it was also the symbol of an era of industrial dreams, of engineers who wanted to reach farther than they could. And perhaps, because of this, the most hated truck in the Soviet Union ended up earning a place in history and in the hearts of those who survived it. If the story of the Kolkhida intrigued you, that truck that combined giant dreams with monumental failures, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe, and activate the bell. Join us in the next story, where we will explore more legends of Soviet transport, and you'll discover machines that left a mark, for better or for worse, on the roads of history.